Julie, it's good to see you today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Always good talking with you. Enjoying the spring-like weather there in D.C.?
It's a little hot. I turned my air conditioning on in my car. It's a little, I can always complain. I'm either too cold or the minute we get a 73-degree day, I'm sweating. So it's nice.
Just wait.
I should
Soon
just
it'll
be
be like
positive.
95 and
I know.
80% humidity in D.C.
I know.
Right?
Can't wait.
Now, you did recently have a chance to escape D.C. You were telling me you were up in New York at an event with our friend Lenore Skenazy from Free Range Kids, who now has this new project, right?
Yeah, she has this really great new project called Let Grow. And it's, Lenore is the founder and she sort of runs Free Range Kids, which reaches out to parents to tell parents, and I've talked about this multiple times on the show, it's good to give your kids a measure of freedom. Let them, walk to school, let them play by themselves at a park without, hovering over them. So she's sort of, the founder of this movement. There are a lot of people who believe that this is the right way to parent and I sort of do, I try to free range as much as possible. I hover in other areas, but I do my best to adopt those principles. So she has partnered up with Jonathan Haidt, who is a very famous sort of philosopher and writer, to start this new program called Let Grow. And instead of parents, although they do reach out to parents, but their main focus is reaching out to schools and trying to get schools to adopt almost a curriculum that integrates free-range principles into the learning process. So, for instance, they might have a contest and say, hey, kids, who can come up with 3 things this week that I can do on my own, right? Or actually make it an assignment in the classroom where a teacher says, look, go home, and they're very smart. They integrate the parents into this. They say, go home and ask your parents if there's one thing that you could do that you can do on your own, whether that's tackling some chores around the house on their own, or walking to school again, playing at a park by themselves, maybe going to the store for mom to pick up a loaf of bread, something like that. And so again, it's reaching out to schools to try to get schools to do this. And as Lenore and I have talked about this, one thing that has always stuck with me is the idea that if one parent's doing it, you feel a little bit like, okay, it's okay to do it. It's like being at the park and, you bring Happy Meals and you're convinced you're going to get the stink eye from all the other parents. You see someone else giving their kid like a cookie and you're like, okay, I'm not the only one. Right? Is that same kind of concept? Like, okay, if other people are letting their kids walk to school by themselves, it must be okay. I must not be a terrible mother. Or if my children, they play at parks by themselves. I don't always stick around. Sometimes I drop them off. I go do errands. I come back and get them. If you kind of tell another parent that you do that, it's amazing. Sometimes the reaction I get like, oh, is that okay? Yeah, it's fine. Do it. It's great. It's good for them. So I think one thing that's really smart about this new Let Grow program is the idea that they're going to try. Schools are an authority figure. They are, parents sometimes go to schools for guidance on things. And so if you can get the schools into this and accepting this, maybe more parents will do it.
Well, and certainly, as you and I have talked about before, Julie, schools are taking more and more of a role, right? Whether we like it or not. And in some cases, I think we definitely don't like it,
right.
Of supplanting parents, right?
Yes.
So, and listen, you can fight against that and you can push back against it, but you also have to acknowledge that that is the reality. So if that is the reality and you want to make inroads, you want kids to be more independent, guess where you're going to have to go, right? So, I think that's actually a really savvy move to actually try to use the school, something that we can oftentimes see as enablers of these fragile kids who can't function. And actually, okay, if we can use that to our advantage in terms of empowering these kids, then that's a good thing.
Well, I think also you do have a little. I think you nailed it there. Schools. I've written about this several times. How it concerns me a great deal that schools have become sort of social service centers. They provide 3 meals a day, before care, after care. They provide a list every 3 months. I get a list of all these entertaining things my kid can do after school. Right? They have really nothing. I guess you could say their continuing education or their whatever, supplemental education. Look, it's just so mom can have an extra hour and a half before pickup. Okay, let's be honest here. These after like chess and there's basket weaving, there's flower arranging, there's everything. I mean, spare me this idea that my child's going to be injured if they don't get to take pottery class. But
I'm so glad I got to be a latchkey kid.
I know.
Honestly, I'm so glad I got to be a latchkey kid.
And to be honest with you, I've stopped sending my kids to those programs because I don't actually think they're all that well managed. However, and I do feel like it's more of a sort of a babysitting kind of concept. But again, this is provided through the school. I mean, this isn't a rec center. It's not like you pick up your kid and then you go to a rec center and you've signed them up through the rec center, right? This is through the school. There's healthcare services. Even some high schools have daycare facilities for teens who've had children. So, there's a lot of services available at the schools, and that and so, this is sort of another issue. But it's sometimes when you see these politicized school staffs and increasingly political. There's all these calls for a walkout now. And I sometimes go, well, of course they've gotten political because they do everything else for these children. So why not be responsible for their political thinking, their political development? I don't think it's that much of a stretch. I'm not saying I sympathize with these people. I don't think politics should be in the classroom. But, it makes sense. It's like, well, why not? They do everything. And this is a part of parenting, kind of figuring out, telling a child, like, this is how you should. This is why we believe the way we do on certain issues. Well, that's a parenting role normally. It's not surprising that teachers are taking this on. So anyway, look, back to Let Grow. I think that this is a way to encourage schools to adopt some of these important principles about why free ranging, why giving your children a little bit more freedom. Why not, sort of mollycoddling them, is important. These are important things. And if we can get the schools on board, there's a chance we'll get more parents on board.
Talking again with Julie Gunlock from the Independent Women's Forum. All right, now you were also telling me right before we started recording this conversation about a bill, and I don't think of Maine as being particularly friendly to the nanny state, but there's a nanny state bill in Maine?
And that's because it's New Hampshire, Cam. I may have
okay.
I may have missed.
Well, heck, New Hampshire is the live free or die state, so I don't think
anymore.
New Hampshire is home to a lot of nanny state policies either. Okay, tell me about this legislation.
They are now. So now there is a new law in New Hampshire
it's a law.
where
okay.
I believe so. I think it got passed. You can correct me on that. It could be a bill introduced, but I think it's a law.
This was actually a proclamation offered up by the legislature in Hawaii. But
this is like the most painful conversation. Two people who really don't know what they're talking about. Maine, New Hampshire, it's a law, it's a bill. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, there's some sort of thing up in New Hampshire to ban the sale of sodas to children in restaurants. This is the height. Every once in a while there's these delicious examples of just how big and bloated and stupid the government has gotten. And this is one of these. The idea that the government, like some bureaucrat in New Hampshire, think it's their job to control what you're ordering for your kid, along with their burger and nuggets and pizza. So, excuse me, people, but soda is not the only source of calories, okay? And let's be honest. I've done research in this. Families do not go out to dinner that often, and actually, the one who the demographic who has the highest rates of obesity, they go out to dinner about once a week, and they do a lot of home cooking to save money. Very basic home cooking to save money. So, poor people. Large people, small people, they all have the same strategy when they go out to a restaurant. You want kind of a treat, right? And then you go back and you have water at home, right? So it's absurd to suggest that this kind of ban is, oh gosh, childhood obesity is way down and it's all because of this stupid soda ban. It is not going to move that needle a bit. It is another.
All right. Hang on for a second. Hang on. Take a breath.
I've taken one.
I have information to impart. Okay.
You have your computer.
Part of this is going to set you off. I do. So this is New Hampshire.
Yes.
It is a bill. It is not a new law.
Good.
But it did have a public hearing. WMUR, with a story on this, Representative Timothy Horrigan the bill's author, Democrat from Durham, said, quote, "I guess this bill has been ridiculed as a nanny state bill. I know many people think the nanny state is an inherently bad thing, and I'm sure that you're going to hear that during the debate. But a nanny is someone who protects, cares for, and teaches small children. So being a nanny is not necessarily entirely a bad thing."
Thank you, Mr. Doubtfire. Thank you. That's adorable. That was
And the
lovely.
bill would require food service establishments that offer kids meals to limit drink choices to milk, water, sparkling or flavored water, or juice.
Juice, which has
customer
actually-
could still order a soda. Here's the stupidest part about this, Julie. A customer could still order a soda for a child, but that would have to be done separately.
Right.
Listen,
Right.
you cannot tell me, Representative Horrigan from Durham, you can't tell me that this is one of the top 1 million things, that are pressing in the state of New Hampshire right now.
Nope.
Good Lord.
It's weird. It's weird. You interrupted me because I thought you were going to calm me down. You just made me more mad.
That's what a good host does.
No, I mean, look, this is again, this is the case of these politicians who are bored. Apparently they don't know what's going on in their state. New Hampshire, I'm sure, has some issues to tackle. And they like these gestures. It's re-election time. They're going to say, hey, look, I tackled the big soda companies, and it does nothing. What it does is it burdens small businesses, and these restaurants now have to make these changes. Then you got some 14-year-old who's a waiter at Bob's Pizza Shack, and he accidentally serves soda to some 4-year-old, and then some trial lawyer comes along. I mean, we see how all of these things happen. It becomes a burden to business. It becomes a burden to parents. I have 2 underweight children. Seriously. I go to the doctor. They're like, are you feeding them? I feed them all the time. And they are underweight. If I choose to give my children a calorie bump at night, because as usual, they don't eat, but they'll drink a Sprite, that's my choice. That is my choice. And it's one of these, it's just so irritating. I think that most parents see this for what it is. It's just one of these gestures that won't do anything to help childhood obesity and make children more nutritious. But it's a way to give this politician, something to point to as really taking on not only a big company, but a big, big problem.
I wonder when he's going to introduce a bill that would require you to show ID before you can buy a candy bar at the convenience store,
It's only a matter of time.
I guess so. 16, I guess, would be the age limit, right? Because if you're old enough to vote, you should be old enough to buy a candy bar. It's House Bill 1668 there in New Hampshire. We'll try to keep our eyes on that. Julie, listen, thank you so much for coming in studio today. It's good talking with you.
Thanks for having me.